Alright, so this is a suggestion via Discord. The name of the video is, it's been 140 years since this Catholic nun passed, but her body is said to be mysteriously unchanged. Guys, when I hear a title like that, I think of instantly, this is not the weirdest case, right? Keep this in mind, 140 years is very young compared to the Diva mummy out in China. She was found 40 feet deep. This was, 2,150 years old, right? She died at 50. Her skin is still soft, and how this happened was they buried her in a water and airtight tomb. So it tells me, most likely, this nun was probably buried in a water and or airtight tomb. So 140 years, she's probably the same as when she went in, right? Specifically, if the woman that's 2,150 years old, her skin is still soft and her hair is still there, eyelashes, teeth, internal organs. Yeah, it's plausible. But all right, let's check it out.
Have you ever wondered what happens after we die? For decades, many have given themselves to understanding the mysteries surrounding death and whether there truly is anything after we kick it. While we continue to ask these hard questions, there are some things that we know. For instance, it's common knowledge that the human body decomposes after death. And over time, every component of the body literally gets stripped off. But what if I told you that there are some people whose bodies have remained just so, even decades and decades after death? It might seem like fiction, but this is absolutely true. And in this video, we'll be looking at the interesting story of one nun whose body has apparently managed to defy Father Time, Saint Bernadette of Lourdes.
Okay.
Catholicism, as we know it, is one of the most popular religions in the world. At the same time, it can be one of the most mysterious, and over the years, we've seen several examples of incidents that completely defy logic happening. The life and death of Bernadette Soubirous can easily fall into that category. This was a woman who devoted herself to spreading the gospel and whose life contained so many miracles that it was no wonder she was eventually canonized. Born in January 1844, Bernadette Soubirous was the daughter of a miller and a laundress. She was the oldest of 9 kids, and life was pretty tough at the time. With her parents being part of France's lower class and having 9 children to cater to, things were definitely a tad challenging. That said, Bernadette's godmother and aunt, Bernard Castereau, was a moderately wealthy woman. She owned a tavern, and from the income made there, she was able to lend a hand in supporting their family. Still, things didn't necessarily get better as an economic hardship had befallen the French nation early into Bernadette's life. The family lived in extreme poverty, and to make things worse, Bernadette had also fallen sick. At a young age, Bernadette contracted cholera and suffered severe asthma, sicknesses that followed her all her life. Her ailment was pretty terrible, and because of it, she only measured 4 feet and 7 inches in height. Nevertheless, she tried her best to live a normal life. She attended a day school conducted by the Sisters of Christ and Christian Instruction of Nevers, and although her constant illnesses affected her education, she gave her all in school. The Lady of Immaculate Conception. Anyways, over time, things got so bad for the Soubirous family that they literally had to live in a 1-room basement that was formerly used as a jail. They were housed by Bernadette's mother's cousin, enduring the terrible living conditions as they were simply just trying to get by. On February 11th, 1858, while gathering firewood with her sister Toinette and a friend near the grotto of Massabielle, a 14-year-old Bernadette had her first vision. According to official records, Bernadette's sister and friend had crossed a little stream in front of the grotto and walked on while she stayed behind to take off her shoes so she could cross the water. While lowering her stockings, she suddenly heard the sound of a powerful, rushing wind, but nothing around her was moving. Suddenly, Bernadette saw a dazzling light and a white figure coming out of a niche in the grotto. In later testimonies, Bernadette claimed that the figure she saw was that of a small young lady, but her sister and friend who were with her confirmed they did not see a thing. 3 days after the first vision, Bernadette and her sister Marie, as well as several other girls, were returning to the grotto after Sunday Mass. All of a sudden, Bernadette fell to her knees, saying that she had seen the same figure again. The apparition eventually disappeared, although Bernadette acclaimed a few days later that the figure she had been seeing had told her to return to the grotto every day for a whole fortnight. Bernadette obliged.
A fortnight is 2 weeks, guys.
And this period of having daily visions eventually came to be known as La Quinzaine Sacrée, or, for those who might not speak French, the Holy Fortnight. According to reports, Bernadette's parents, particularly her mother, were initially embarrassed and even tried to forbid her from going to the grotto. I mean, the poor girl probably didn't even know who she was seeing or what the motive was behind these visions. But after
Exactly. It seemed like she was just moving off of faith.
didn't even know who she was seeing or what the motive was behind these visions. But after word of her visions spread, they eventually let her leave. Most people who heard of the visions believe Bernadette was seeing the Virgin Mary, but she never exactly said this was who was appearing to her.
Okay.
Instead, she described the lady as wearing a white veil and a blue girdle, while also having a yellow rose on each of her feet. To be fair, this image was quite similar to that of a statue of the Virgin Mary at a local village church. Still, Bernadette never exactly confirmed that she had been seeing the Virgin Mary in her visions. Anyways, Bernadette's story continued to spread like wildfire among the townspeople. As you'd imagine, a lot of people thought she was telling the truth, and just as many people believed that it was all a bald-faced lie. In fact, there were even those who believed that she had a mental illness and was just manifesting it. Still, by the time she began to really show the fruits of the visions, let's just say that everyone else started to believe. For instance, a few days after the visions began, Bernadette claimed that the figure she saw in her dream had asked her to drink the spring's water, have a bath in it, and eat a herb that grew close to it, all
Drink and bathe in it?
as an act of penance. She did, and to the utter shock of everyone, the grotto was no longer muddy the next day. Muddy water gave way to fresh water, and literally no one could explain what had happened. About a month later, Bernadette claimed that the lady in her visions told the town to build a chapel and form a procession. All of this was quite impressive, but there was still one issue. Bernadette didn't know who this woman was. During the 16th visitation, Bernadette claimed that she asked the woman for her name, but she just smiled back. After repeating the question 3 more times, she finally got a response, with the woman claiming that she was the Immaculate Conception. That was it, just the Immaculate Conception. No actual name and no information about who she was. All of these visitations would go on until the 16th of July that year. But even though they ended, the effects of Bernadette's visions would just be beginning. Impacts of Bernadette's visions.
Okay.
Following the end of the visitations, the Catholic Church began investigating Bernadette's story to see if there was any truth to them, or if it was all just a big lie. The church eventually confirmed the authenticity of the apparitions in 1862, giving even more credence to everything that Bernadette had said. One of the interesting things about this whole ordeal is that the spring that Bernadette dug up and drank from has become one of the world's biggest healing sites to this day. According to records from the Lourdes Medical Bureau, at least 70 cures to diseases have been gotten from the spring, with scientists being baffled and not being able to find any explanation for how they even came to be. The very same Lourdes Commission that
What's the name of this spring?
for how they even came to be. The very same Lourdes Commission that examined Bernadette following her visions took samples of the spring water for analysis, and they found that while it had a high
It's called Lourdes' water. Interesting.
mineral content,
Free of
there really
charge.
wasn't anything out of the ordinary about the water that could link it to the cures attributed to it. On the other hand, Bernadette simply claimed that it was her faith and prayer that healed the sick, nothing more.
Okay.
Besides the healings, Bernadette's visions also led to the building of a local chapel in the town. However, it wasn't just one chapel. Over time, several churches and chapels were established and built in Lourdes, all being inspired by Bernadette's story and experience. Today, the sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes is one of the most popular Catholic pilgrimage sites in the world. Almost 1 million people attend pilgrimage here every year, many of whom come to worship and also to drink from the miracle spring, Bernadette's latter days. Now, you might think that Bernadette would be proud of how popular her spring has become and the impact that her church has had. But this might not necessarily be true. According to reports, she disliked the attention she was getting as
Yeah, I figured that. That was the number one thing for me personally. I was like, she may not actually like it based off what we've been encountering.
a result of the visions and the visits. So she decided to relocate to a hospice school run by the Sisters of Charity of Nevers. This was actually where she learned to read and write, as most of her formative years were spent battling her many illnesses. By July 1866, Bernadette, as well as 42 other candidates, took the religious habit of a postulant by joining the Sisters of Charity at the Saint Gildard convent at Nevers. She was given the name Marie Bernard by the Mother Superior there, and she began a life of devotion to Saint Bernard, her patron saint. Bernadette would copy long texts related to him on pieces of paper and notebooks, and overall, the entire experience of becoming Sister Marie Bernard marked yet another transformative experience for Bernadette. She would eventually spend the rest of her rather short life at the Mother House, where she worked as an assistant at the infirmary. Later, she worked as a sacristan, making ornate embroidery for things like vestments and altar cloths. Despite all of the attention she had garnered, Bernadette was said to have been a very humble spirit. As she herself put it, the entire result of the visions was to enhance the gospel in some way. She was used as a tool for that. And now that the work was done, it was only right that she continued to live her life. Even though she preferred to remain relatively detached, Bernadette continued to follow the development of Lourdes as it became a pilgrimage shrine. She wasn't present at the consecration of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in 1876, but she at least kept tabs on how her hometown had developed, all thanks to the divine visits that she had gotten. Sadly, her childhood health issues continued to get worse. Bernadette suffered chronic asthma, and she even contracted tuberculosis of the bones and lungs.
No.
For several months, Bernadette was left without the ability to take part in active convent life. She eventually passed away due to complications from her long-term illnesses in April 1879. By the time of her death, Bernadette was just 35 years old.
I think the biggest takeaway, at least, to find out exactly how she's been unchanged, at least, is to figure out how she was buried, guys.
According to reports, she had died while praying the Holy Rosary, with her final words being, "Blessed Mary, Mother of God, pray for me." Her body was eventually laid to rest in the St. Joseph Chapel, right on her convent's grounds, the incorruptible body. Several years after her death in 1921, Bernadette was declared blessed by Pope Pius V. The same pope canonized her in December 1933, marking the feast of the Immaculate Conception. But even after her passing, Bernadette continued to ruffle feathers. This time, there was a huge controversy over her body. You see, in September 1909, the Catholic Church, as well as Bishop Gauthier of Nevers, decided to exhume Bernadette's body. This activity was done in the presence of representatives who were appointed by the church, as well as 2 medical doctors and a sister of the community. And to their utter shock, Bernadette's body had apparently not decomposed. According to reports, the crucifix that Bernadette died with, as well as her rosary, had oxidized. But her body remained incorrupt and not decomposing. This discovery was one of the major reasons why Bernadette was eventually canonized. And following it, her body was washed and reclothed before it was reburied in a new casket. Once again, Bernadette's body was exhumed in April of 1919.
I think my main question here is they keep saying exhumed. Generally, that means you're redigging up the body that was previously in the ground, right? But the thing is was she put into like a crypt or like literally into the dirt? Two big differences.
This time, a doctor who examined her body claimed that he had noticed some significant signs of mummification forming on her skin. The doctor added that Bernadette's skin had also disappeared in some places, although it was still present on most parts. Following this examination, Bernadette's body was once again reburied, and a third examination came in 1925. This time, the church took relics from Bernadette's corpse and sent them to Rome. From these relics, an accurate imprint of Bernadette's face was molded to make a wax mask. The goal was to present any corruption of her body, while imprints of Bernadette's hands were also taken to help with body presentation and the making of wax casts. Understanding incorruptibility. The fact that Bernadette's body remained untouched was a pretty interesting one. But while you might believe this was an incredible occurrence, it's actually a bit more common than you might think. You see, a central part of the Christian faith is the belief in the concept of mortality. At the end of the day, everyone dies. However, to atone for the sins of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Christians believe that Jesus Christ came to the earth and died for our sins. That said, Christ did more than just come to the earth to die. All through his life, he also raised several people from the dead, including Lazarus, a poor man who had been dead for 3 days before Christ raised him. For some early Christians, an extension of these miracles is the concept of incorruptibility after death. It's seen as proof of holiness and oneness with God, as well as evidence of a person's spirituality. For a corpse to be deemed incorruptible, it will need to be immune to the natural forces of putrefaction. This means that the body will need to naturally overcome the effects of decay without the use of processes such as embalming. That said, it is worth noting that a body doesn't have to avoid decay forever to be considered incorruptible. Instead, the body just has to exhibit supernatural preservation at some point in its purported history. At the same time, incorruptibility doesn't necessarily have to happen across the body's entire frame. Even the presence of singular body parts that have refused to decay could be seen as conclusive proof of a body's incorruptibility. As a matter of fact, most of the incorruptible bodies that the Catholic Church holds in esteem today, including that of Saint Bernadette, have actually been artificially improved over the years to maintain their aesthetic appeal and appearance. All in all, there are about 100 incorruptible bodies recognized by the Catholic Church. Most of these bodies are kept in Italy, with some also in countries such as Poland, Belgium, Austria, Germany, and even India. That said, the fact that there most likely have been several other incorruptibles in the past means that getting an accurate count might not necessarily be possible. Saint Bernadette was a woman whose life and death were literally miracles. From her courageous battle with illnesses to the visions that made her a saint, Bernadette was truly a special woman. And considering all that she managed to do, it really isn't much of a surprise that her body managed to stand the test of time even after she died. Still, what are your thoughts?
All right, so I can give you my opinion. So anytime that I've ever seen any of these things, it's always been the same exact thing, right? Like, I've never heard this angle before, ever, actually. But every single time I've seen anything like this, the person was basically buried into some type of crypt. It was sealed by stone. It was kept away from water. They were not on the bottom row of the crypt. They were kind of like in the middle or at the top, right? And the cover stone, for the most part, was pushed into there, and there was like no air in there moving. There was no movement. And those are the only times I've actually ever seen or heard of anything like this, or they were frozen, right? Like specifically the woman that was found in, I think she was an Inca woman, right? So either frozen or in a place that had literally no air or water. I've never heard this angle before, but it's interesting to actually encounter. I've never heard this story before neither. Healing springs in Lourdes, France, guys. That's super interesting. And yeah, people are claiming that they have had like serious ailments basically fixed here, guys. Again, another thing that I've never heard of, guys. But if it works for people, bro, I hope that it keeps working for people. Seriously, I think everyone deserves to believe in whatever they feel is can have the ability to kind of complete them mentally, if that makes any sense, guys. I definitely wish that for everyone. Right? But all right, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Guys, before we go, are you guys subscribed to the other channels? Logical Movie Reviews with Mr. L. Boyd, along with Mr. L. Boyd Music. Both are found in the description. Check it out.